Hi, I'm Dr. Sean Lynch. I'm the co-founder and co-president of Better Elections Now, and this is my educational presentation, How to Read an Opinion Poll. Before I begin, let me just say two things. Number one, this will be a somewhat informal presentation. And number two, the example polls that I'm using are from this summer. I'm recording this on October 16th of 2020. So the polls that I'm going to show to you are not particularly relevant to this moment. They're just examples. If you would like to read about my credentials and why I feel I'm qualified to give you a presentation on how to read an opinion poll, you can certainly pause for a moment and read this slide, and that will explain to you who I am and what I'm trying to accomplish. So before we get to the opinion poll, I want to remind you about how the President of the United States is elected. The President of the United States is indirectly elected by the voters of the United States. The only people who are qualified constitutionally to elect the President of the United States are presidential electors. The choice of those electors by the Constitution is left up to the state legislatures. However, in all 50 states, the state legislatures have devolved that by law to a popular vote. Every state except Maine and Nebraska award all of their presidential electoral votes by the winner of the statewide popular vote. Maine and Nebraska do it slightly differently. They award 2 electoral votes for the winner of the statewide popular vote, and then 1 electoral vote for the winner of the popular vote in each congressional district. I have another presentation that is available by Google Slides or on our YouTube page, where I recorded a similar presentation called The Dysfunctions of the US Electoral System. If you would like to read more about that, I invite you to go to our website and find that link. Our website is www.betterelectionsnow.org. This map shows you the number of electoral votes that each state has. And as I said earlier, Maine and Nebraska do split their votes, unlike the rest of the states. So you have to approach an opinion poll scientifically. You have to approach it rationally. You have to understand that opinion polls can be manipulated. Questions can be manipulated. That there are firms that have an excellent track record, and there are firms like Rasmussen that spend an awful lot of time getting the results that they want for the people that pay for their polls. And in the case of Rasmussen, that would be the Republican Party. So when you are looking at opinion polls, you have to be sure to check your own bias and understand that you want to know what the data says, not what you want to read in the opinion poll. I'm going to talk later about the best website to go to, which is 538.com, run by Nate Silver, who is the preeminent pollster in the country, statistician, and his website is where you start. But I'll say more about that a little bit later. So let me talk about the factors that influence polls, how they work, how they're conducted, etc. The first thing that you always have to understand is there is a phenomenon in the United States and in the United Kingdom called shy Toryism. Tory being the British name for the Conservative Party. So shy Toryism is a real problem. It means that roughly 5% of the electorate in every election lies to pollsters. And they indicate that they will vote liberal, so-called liberal or leftist, when in fact they intend to vote conservative, and they do. So when you're reading an opinion poll, generally speaking, the quote unquote liberal or leftist candidate should be at least 5 points ahead. And to account for shy Toryism. Now, in 2020 in the United States, is there such a thing as a reverse shy Toryism? As, let's call it, a shy Bidenism? Well, it's likely that there are places where with normal shy Toryism, someone is in a position in their life where they don't feel comfortable sharing that they want to vote conservative for whatever reason. Are there places in the country in 2020 where there are people who don't want to vote for Donald Trump but can't say that aloud? I think so. But we have no idea what the percentage could be. It could be 5%, it could be 1%, it could be 20%. We don't know. We have no idea. We'll know on election day, which is about 2 weeks away. So this is something to keep in mind too. Is there a reverse shy Toryism in 2020 because Donald Trump is so polarizing? Poll questions can be manipulative. There are ways in which a polling firm can get an answer it wants. And as I said, one firm that you could look into and understand this phenomenon is Rasmussen. In the 1980s, there was a British comedy called Yes, Prime Minister, and I put the link here. But if you just were to Google Yes, Prime Minister Sir Humphrey polling, you would get the video. And he explains to you how it's done, how there are leading questions that lead you to somewhere where it's, you know, you get to the final question and it's sort of illogical at that point for you to say one answer over another. And then they just drop all the other questions and publish the last one. So people can be manipulated if they're not careful. So 538.com will rate the quality of the polls and the polling firms, and that's where you should go. Here's some examples. And so what I suggest is that you pause and read through these examples. The left-hand column are appropriate questions. The right-hand column is how questions can be put in order to lead a respondent to a particular answer. So I would just take a moment and pause and read these two columns. And I'll just wait for a moment before I advance again. So when you're looking at a poll, the first thing to do is find out what categories were polled. So you are likely to see one of these categories. Adults, that's just voting adults in the United States or in a particular location. Likely voters, these are self-identified. These are people who have said to the pollster, yes, I am likely to go vote. Registered voters, voters who are registered whether or not they are likely to vote. And then finally, Republicans, Democrats, or independents. These are all self-identified. Party affiliation, point 5. I think you would be very surprised to know that the number of Americans who affiliate with each party is actually lower than the number of Americans who identify as independent. So as of June this year, and these numbers I don't believe have changed much, 25% of the public identifies as Republican, 40% identified as independent, and 31% as Democrat. So consider that when President Trump says he has a 98% approval rating with Republicans, well, okay, that's a 98% approval rating of 25% of the population, which is not much. And it would be the same if someone said that about the Democratic Party. Now, one thing that you must keep in mind at this juncture as well is this. There are people who say that they are independent who are not. I don't know what the percentage is, but there are people that say, yes, I'm an independent, but they always vote Republican or they always vote Democrat. Those people absolutely exist, and you should keep that in mind too when reading polling data. And this is just a commentary about the number of Republicans versus Democrats has changed in 2020. And as a political historian, I can say this is because of the divisive nature of Donald Trump, most likely. So you have to first see who is being polled. Is it adults? Is it likely voters? Is it registered voters? Is it independents, Republicans, Democrats, or all of them? And you must pay attention to the number. So consider that a poll of 1,000 likely voters is probably more accurate than a poll of 2,000 adults. So polling data that is from likely voters is going to be more accurate because those are the people who have self-identified that they are going to vote. No polling firm is ever going to be 100% correct on all the polls it takes. There is what's called the margin of error, which I will explain in just a moment. A margin of error indicates that the polling firm is saying we could be off by this percentage. Might be 1%, might be 6%. It's usually somewhere between 2 and 4%. But what this says is, we could be off by as much as 3%. So if you have a poll that shows candidate A leading by 3%, and the margin of error is 3%, then that is a toss-up. So you always have to take into account what the margin of error is for that poll. So I've given you on this slide some examples of trying to account for shy Toryism, for the margin of error. And basically the liberal so-called candidate needs really to be up by 7, 8, 9% to have what we might consider a solid lead. That's just the way it is. So here's an important point about Hillary Clinton. And we've heard Trump voters say for 4 years, the polls, the polls, the polls. Well, the thing is, number one, a presidential election is not a nationwide election. It is a state-by-state election. And number two, there was no credible poll that said Donald Trump would definitely not win. They all indicated that he had a chance of winning. And although she led very handily in early October, after the Comey intervention and other things, the emails, by the time we got to Election Day, Hillary Clinton was only leading by about 4%. And that wasn't enough. Donald Trump won a very unlikely combination of electoral college states. There were, I heard recently, 40 million Democratic voters that stayed home in 2016 because either they didn't like Hillary Clinton or they figured she was going to win. And so why bother? So the polls indicated that Clinton would win the nationwide popular vote, and she did. The polls were correct. The polls also indicated that Donald Trump always had a chance of winning, and he did. So the polls in 2016 were largely correct. It's just that Trump pulled out one of the unlikely wins, and these things do happen. We must also remember, too, that there was voter suppression in Republican states. It is true that Republicans only win nationwide these days when they cheat, and they have gotten very, very good at cheating. There is no voter fraud in the United States, none. There is election fraud. Elections are being stolen by Republicans. For example, 2000, 2016, look at the Georgia governor's race. Republicans only win in 2020 when they cheat. And their voter suppression has made an impact. That voter suppression has to be ended, must be ended. So here's a poll from the this summer of 2020. And it's a reminder that probabilities are not certainties. That, even as I speak, the probability is that Joe Biden will win, knock on wood. But there's always a chance that Trump wins in some unlikely way. It is likely that Trump will try to cheat. He's made that very evident. So we'll see what happens in 2 weeks. But this just shows you that, Biden is likely to win these states. Trump is likely to win those states. Of course, this is again from the summer before Trump got COVID and the debates, etc. So you can pause this screen and just read what I wrote. Even today, what we can say is Joe Biden is likely to win the presidency. That's all you can say. Anyone who says anything with certainty is wrong. And this is too just another probabilities are not certainties. Okay, so you may have heard the term outlier, an outlier poll. What does that mean? Well, an outlier poll is one that is conducted in an area, and it is very different from all of the other recent polls that have been conducted in that area. So, for example, if you look at the chart before you, you see, and again, this is from this summer, you had two, Hodis and Associates and Change Research, that in May of 2020 showed that Donald Trump was plus 4 points in Pennsylvania. Whereas all of the other polls showed Biden with a sizable lead from 6 to 10 points, 5 to 10 points, or 13. So what does that mean? Well, an outlier can be one of two things. Well, one of three things. It can be the end of a trend, it can be the beginning of a trend, or it can just be bad polling. So it's likely that in this case, these were the end of the trend of Pennsylvanians looking favorably on Donald Trump. Somehow these two firms sort of corralled the right number of people that, still felt that Pennsylvania would go for Trump. And they became an outlier for the end of a trend. That is likely what happened. But it can also be that an outlier is picking up a new trend, that things are now beginning to shift or to change in favor of one candidate or another. And then finally, it could simply be bad polling. So outliers are interesting, but you have to remember that they are either the end of a wave or they could foretell a new one. Here's some commentary that I made specifically. So if you want to pause this slide, you can read the commentary that I said. But it's just noting that these two polls were definitely outliers when they were taken. Now, in the 2012 election between President Obama and Governor Romney, Fox News claimed the entire election that Romney was going to win 320 electoral votes. And what they told everybody is, no, we have unskewed the polls. And this was a total disaster. Fox News had to spend months explaining how they got this wrong. Because all they did was decide that not as many people would come out to vote for President Obama in 2012 as they did in 2008, and that, lower voter turnout would favor Governor Romney. So all they did was decide, no, the Democratic voters aren't going to vote as much as they did in 2008. And they were wrong. So Fox News tried something that didn't work because it was nonsensical. You will see after an event, after a rally, a convention, a debate, these instant online polls. These are totally worthless and you can't take them seriously. They are not scientific. There's no way to tell that anyone has voted more than once or not. There's no way to know who is taking this or how many times. So, I am a supporter of Bernie Sanders, and, there was always these instant polls after any debate that showed him winning. But those polls didn't mean anything. They weren't scientific polls. They're just there to make people feel good about themselves. Candidates or voters, who want to see that one side or the other is winning. And these online polls can get you whatever you want because they're not scientific. So please don't ever take them for granted or even take them seriously is a better way to put that. So you should now go to 538.com and start exploring. And I'm going to show you a few screenshots from it. But this is where you go to get your polling data and to learn about polling firms and who knows what they're talking about. 538.com. So before you pause and run off there, let me show you a few screenshots so you'll see and what you're looking for. So again, these are from July. And you'll notice that there are polling firms, Data for Progress, Morning Consult, Ipsos, Rasmussen, HarrisX, and they have a grade, which is explaining to you how accurate they are. How good of a polling firm are they? You'll see the sample. So the one at the very top, 673 RV, registered voters. The one right below it, 745A, adults. Below that, registered voters. And then if you go all the way down to Rasmussen Pulse Opinion, 1,500 likely voters. So you can see, and by the way, when Rasmussen says that a liberal is winning, the liberal is winning by a lot. Because Rasmussen does create polls to make Republicans happy. And so if Rasmussen says that a liberal candidate is leading by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 percentage points, then they are really ahead. And that's not me saying that, that's professional polling people. So take a minute and just sort of scan through that. Here I've broken it down for you. So I would suggest that you pause for just a moment and read these comments. You want to know who is surveyed and how many. Obviously, a survey of 33,000 people is going to be more accurate than a survey of 745. Always note the date. When was the poll taken? When you're looking at the summary of the poll's findings, remember you have to take into account any margin of error, and you have to take into account shy Toryism. So the date, who was polled, how many were polled, how do they identify themselves, likely voters, adults, registered voters, by party. All of those factors go into understanding the accuracy of a poll. The only poll that matters is election day. That's it. So don't take any poll for granted. Mistakes can be made. Unlikely outcomes can happen, as happened in 2016. So when you sit down to read your polls, please do so as an informed voter and as a good citizen, someone who's trying to be a good citizen, someone who's trying to know what answer's right, not what answer will make you feel good about yourself because you like this person or that person or this party or that party. We have a lot of bad citizens in this country and we need people to be good citizens again. And I hope that I can encourage you to do that. So I'm just going to click through and you can pause if you'd like, but the best thing to do is go to 538. You can look at the rankings yourself as they currently stand, but I'll just click through the screens here. And this is just various polling firms and the grade that they are receiving by 538. When I took these screen captures in the summer of 2020, notice on the right-hand side, mean reverted bias. This is sort of showing, you know, do they kind of end up leaning too much one way or the other, right? So SurveyMonkey leans heavily towards Democrats. Rasmussen leads 1.5 points towards Republicans. So these are factors to take into account. Thank you all very much for listening to my presentation. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. We have our own website where we publish voter education information, betterelectionsnow.org. And you can always email me at betterelectionsnow@gmail.com. Thank you all very much. I wish you a very happy evening.